The paper my cousin Leo held up was my death sentence. One moment, the air in our crowded backyard was filled with laughter and the smell of barbecue, a party to celebrate my father's retirement. The next, the music was cut, and Leo was standing on a patio chair, a triumphant smirk on his face. "Attention everyone," he shouted, his voice slicing through the noise. He waved the document in his hand. "I have an announcement. As of today, Hayes & Son Bakery belongs to me. Serafina, you have 1 week to pack your things and leave." My heart didn't just sink, it shattered and fell out of my body. My name is Serafina Hayes, and I am 29 years old. For the past decade, my world has revolved around the warm, sweet-smelling heart of our town, Hayes & Son Bakery. It should have been Hayes and Daughter. I was the one who woke up before the sun, my hands coated in flour, my mind memorizing every secret my grandpa ever whispered about bread and pastry. I was the one who stayed late, balancing books and creating new recipes that brought customers from 3 towns over. The bakery wasn't just my job, it was my inheritance, my future, and the only thing I ever truly loved. Leo, on the other hand, barely knew where we kept the sugar. He was my uncle's son, a slick city boy who visited twice a year, always making jokes about my little hobby. Now he stood there, puffed up with pride, holding a paper that was supposed to be my dream. I looked at my dad, hoping to see confusion or anger on his face. Instead, I saw guilt. He couldn't even look at me. He just stared at the ground as if it held all the answers. In that moment I knew. This wasn't a surprise to him. He was a part of it. My legs felt like they were moving through water as I pushed through the stunned crowd of relatives and friends. "Dad, what is he talking about?" My voice came out as a tiny, broken whisper. My mother reached for my father's arm, her face as white as a ghost. Leo hopped down from the chair and shoved the paper into my hands. It was an official transfer of ownership. The word swam before my eyes, but one thing was painfully clear. The signature at the bottom belonged to my father, Robert Hayes. My own dad had signed away my life. I forced my eyes to focus on the date printed next to his name. It was from last Tuesday. Just 1 week ago. I remembered that day perfectly. Dad and I had sat in his office, the one that was supposed to be mine soon. He told me how proud Grandpa would have been. He'd hugged me tightly, his voice thick with emotion as he said, "It's all yours, Sarah. You've earned it more than anyone." Were those all lies? What could have possibly happened between that heartfelt promise and this devastating betrayal? What changed in just 7 days? The silence in the yard was deafening. Then, my Aunt Carol, Leo's mother, broke it. She strutted over to her son, wrapping an arm around his shoulders and glaring at me. "It's for the best, Serafina," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "A business this important needs a man's touch to really grow. Leo has big plans." A man's touch. The word struck me like a physical blow. After all my sacrifices, all my passion, all my success, was it all worthless because I was a woman? Was my own father so weak that he believed that lie? I turned back to my dad, my eyes pleading with him to say something, anything. "Dad, please," I begged. He finally looked up, his eyes red and watery. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Your uncle. He helped me out of a huge mess years ago. A very big debt. I promised him I'd pay him back one day. This was the only way. A debt. A secret he had kept hidden my entire life. He was trading his daughter's entire future to settle an old score I knew nothing about. A debt." The word felt foreign and disgusting in my mouth. My whole body started to tremble, not from sadness, but from a cold, rising fury. Leo laughed, a short, barking sound that made my skin crawl. "Yeah, a debt that would have put this whole place under years ago. My dad saved your dad. It's only fair we get what we're owed. Now, the keys to the bakery, cousin. Hand them over." He held out his hand, palm up, with an arrogance that made me want to scream. He looked so sure of himself, so confident that he had already won. I looked at his greedy, waiting hand. I looked at my father's ashamed face and my aunt's smug smile. They all thought I was a simple baker girl, someone who would just cry and walk away. But they forgot who I learned from. My grandpa didn't just teach me how to bake. He taught me how to be strong. He taught me that the most important ingredients are the ones nobody else can see. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old brass key to the front door, its edges worn smooth from years of use. Leo snatched the key from my fingers, holding it up for everyone to see as if it were a king's crown. He thought that key was his victory. My father turned away, unable to watch. But as I turned my back on my family and the only home I had ever known, a small, secret smile touched my lips. They could have the building, the ovens, and the name. But they had forgotten about the one thing that truly mattered. They had forgotten about my grandfather's secret recipe book, locked away where only I could find it. And it contained a recipe powerful enough to destroy them all. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This journey is just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss chapter 2, because this isn't just a story about loss. It's a story about revenge. I walked away from the party without looking back. Each step I took on the dark pavement felt heavy, as if I were carrying the weight of my entire life on my shoulders. The cheerful party music and the shocked whispers of my family faded behind me until the only sound was the frantic beating of my own heart. I had nowhere to go. My small apartment was above the bakery, my car keys were in my purse back at the house, and my bank account was tied to the business. They hadn't just taken my future, they had taken my present, too. I found an old wooden bench in the nearby town park and collapsed onto it, the cold night air doing nothing to cool the fire of betrayal burning inside me. Sitting there under the dim park lights, I closed my eyes and saw my grandpa's face. I was 10 years old again, standing on a stool in the bakery kitchen. He pulled out a thick, worn leather book, its pages yellowed with age. "This, my dear Sarah," he had whispered, his voice warm like fresh bread, "is our family's soul. It has recipes, yes, but it's more than that. It's magic. It holds the secret to the bread that made this town fall in love with us. Promise me you will always protect it. It is worth more than all these bricks and ovens put together." My promise to him echoed in my heart. That book was my only hope. It contained the original, secret recipes that no one else knew, not even my father. Leo could have the building, but without that book, the bakery was just an empty shell. The problem was, the book was hidden in a secret compartment in the headboard of my bed, back in my childhood room. Back inside that house filled with traitors. I had to get it, and I had to get it now, while the party created a perfect storm of distraction. But how could I get in and out without anyone seeing me? I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking as I scrolled to the only name I could trust. Chloe. My best friend since kindergarten. She answered on the second ring. "Sarah. What's wrong?" "I heard shouting from your party all the way down the street." I explained everything in a choked whisper, the announcement, my father's betrayal, Leo's smug face. There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then I heard her say, "That snake. Okay, listen to me. I'm coming over. We're getting that book." Chloe was never one to back down from a fight, especially not one of mine. "No," I said, an idea forming in my mind. "You're already there, aren't you? You were helping serve drinks." I knew she was working a side gig for the catering company. "I need a distraction, Chloe. A big one." I could hear her thinking. I could accidentally spill a tray of drinks on the DJ's equipment, she suggested. It would cause a short, kill the music and some of the lights. It'll cause chaos. It was a crazy, risky plan. But crazy and risky were all I had left. It would give me a few minutes, at most. I had to pray it would be enough. I crept through the shadows of my neighbors' yards, making my way to the back of my own house. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from the backyard, followed by a woman's shriek and a shower of sparks. The music died instantly. Chloe did it. In the sudden darkness and confusion, I ran to the laundry room window. The latch had been loose for years, a secret I used as a teenager. It slid open with a soft click, and I quietly slipped inside, a stranger in my own home. The house was dark and quiet, a stark contrast to the panicked shouting coming from the yard. I could hear Leo yelling at someone to check the fuse box. I heard my father's voice, trying to calm everyone down. It was so strange to hear their voices, so familiar, yet now they belonged to monsters in my story. I tiptoed up the stairs, each creak of the floorboards sounding like a gunshot in the silence. My only thought was the book. Get the book and get out. Everything else could wait. Revenge could wait. First, I needed my weapon. I pushed open the door to my old bedroom. It was exactly as I had left it, filled with pictures of friends and memories of a happier life. I rushed to the heavy oak bed frame my grandfather had carved by hand. There was a specific pattern of knots in the wood. I pressed them in the correct order, 2 down, 1 across, 1 up. With a soft click, a small hidden drawer popped out from the side of the headboard. I plunged my hand inside, my fingers searching for the cool, familiar feel of the leather-bound book. But my hand met only empty wood. The drawer was empty. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed me in the chest. It was gone. The book was gone. Had they found it? Did my father know about it all along and give it to them? Was this his final, ultimate betrayal? My legs gave out and I sank to the floor, all the fight draining out of me. It was over. I had nothing. As my eyes filled with tears, my fingers, still inside the empty drawer, brushed against a small piece of folded paper. A note. It was old and crinkly. It hadn't been there before. With trembling hands, I pulled it out and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, but I recognized it instantly. It was my grandpa's. He must have written this near the end of his life and hidden it here for me. The note was just a few words, a riddle that made no sense. It said, "The best secrets are hidden in the first place you ever learn them." The first place? What did that mean? Before I could even begin to process the strange message, I heard heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs. Someone was coming. And I was trapped. The footsteps were heavy, angry, and coming straight for the room. It was Leo. Panic seized me, and I scrambled under the bed, pulling my legs in just as the door flew open and banged against the wall. The overhead light flickered on, blinding me for a second. Leo stormed in, muttering about the stupid DJ and faulty wiring. I held my breath, my face pressed against the dusty floorboards. He paced the room like a caged animal. He kicked the leg of the bed in frustration, his expensive shoe missing my head by inches. Then, as quickly as he entered, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Lying in the darkness, my heart hammering against my ribs, I clutched the note from my grandpa. The best secrets are hidden in the first place you ever learn them. My mind raced, trying to untangle the riddle. Learned what? I scanned the room from my hiding spot. My eyes landed on a small, faded photograph on my nightstand. It was me, maybe 6 years old, beaming with pride, my face and hair dusted with flour. I was holding up a lumpy, crooked loaf of bread. But the background wasn't the main bakery. It was older, more rustic. And a memory, buried for years, suddenly sparked to life. I wasn't in the main bakery in that photo. I was in the old bakehouse. The original small stone building that my great-grandfather built, tucked away behind the main shop and now used for storage. I remembered my grandpa taking my hand and leading me there. "The big bakery is for selling, Sarah," he'd said, his voice soft and serious. "But this little place, this is for magic. This is where a haze first turned flour and water into love. And it's the first place you will learn, too." It was our secret clubhouse, our magic workshop. It all made sense. Of course. He wouldn't have hidden the book in my room, where anyone could eventually find it. He hid it in the one place that was truly ours. My grandpa must have known, near the end, that my father might not be strong enough to protect my legacy. He created a final plan to protect the family's real treasure, its soul. A new wave of hope washed over me, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. The book wasn't lost. It was waiting for me. I had to get to that bakehouse. I slipped out of the house as quietly as I had entered, my body moving on pure adrenaline. The night was cool and quiet now, the partygoers having moved inside. I rounded the back of the property and saw it, nestled under a large oak tree, its stone walls covered in ivy. It looked just as I remembered. But my hope quickly turned to despair. A thick, rusted padlock was clamped onto the heavy wooden door. A lock I had no key for. Leo and his father would have been given all the keys. My hope was trapped behind a wall of iron. Feeling utterly defeated, I walked away from my home and found Chloe waiting for me at the corner, her arms crossed, her face etched with worry. "Did you get it?" she whispered. I shook my head, my voice trembling as I told her about the empty drawer, the riddle, and the locked door. She listened patiently, her anger growing with every word I spoke. We walked in silence to her small apartment a few blocks away. The moment she closed her door behind us, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't completely alone in this nightmare. Chloe's apartment was tiny, but it was safe. She sat me down on her worn-out sofa and made me a hot cup of tea, the way she always did when I was upset. "Okay," she said, kneeling in front of me, her eyes fierce. "So they're monsters. We knew that. But they are not going to win, Sarah. Your grandpa's legacy, your legacy. We are going to fight for it." Hearing her say, "we," sent a surge of strength through my veins. The tears I had been holding back dried up, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I watched the steam rise from my cup. "Leo wants to expand," I said, thinking aloud. "He'll cut corners. Use cheaper flour, less butter, artificial flavors. He'll destroy the bakery's reputation to make a quick buck." A plan, dark and daring, began to form in my mind. He thinks he has the name, but he doesn't have the magic. What if a new bakery opened up right here in town? A small, simple place that sold the real thing. The bread and pastries from Grandpa's secret book. Chloe's eyes widened. "But we have no money, Sarah. Nothing." "I know," I said, my mind racing. "But first things first. I need that book." My thoughts returned to the padlock, a symbol of everything standing in my way. My grandpa was a clever man. He loved puzzles and history. He wouldn't just use a normal key and leave it on a keychain for my father to hand over. He would have hidden it. The words of the riddle came back to me, but this time they had a new meaning. The first place you ever learned them. Maybe he wasn't just talking about the book. Maybe he was talking about the key, too. Suddenly, another memory from that first baking lesson hit me. As I was leaving the bakehouse, my little arms full with my lopsided bread, I had tripped on a loose stone in the hearth of the big, cold brick oven. My grandpa had chuckled, helping me up. He gently nudged the stone back into place with the toe of his boot and gave me a huge wink. "You have to be careful around the heart of the bakery, little one," he had said. The hearthstone. The heart of the bakery. Could it be that simple? Was the key to my entire future hidden right there, this whole time? I had to go back. I had to find out. The clock in Chloe's kitchen ticked past midnight. The world outside was asleep, but my mind was wide awake, buzzing with a single frantic thought. I had to go back. "I have to get that key tonight," I whispered, my voice raw with a mix of fear and determination. "If I wait, they might find it." Chloe didn't even hesitate. She stood up and grabbed her jacket. "Okay," she said simply. "Then we go together." We dressed in dark clothes, grabbed a small flashlight and a crowbar from her toolbox, and slipped out into the silent, sleeping streets like a pair of ghosts on a mission. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car engine, made my heart leap into my throat. The walk back to my house was the longest of my life. When we got there, the house was dark and still. The party was long over. My family was inside, sleeping, dreaming of the empire they had stolen. A wave of sadness washed over me as I looked at my bedroom window. Was my father sleeping peacefully? Or was he staring at the ceiling, haunted by the ghost of the daughter he had thrown away? I pushed the thought aside. I couldn't afford to feel sad. I had to be angry. We crept around to the back, staying in the deep shadows cast by the giant oak tree. The old bakehouse stood before us like a small, stone secret. Chloe stood guard, her eyes scanning the dark windows of the main house, while I knelt by the door. I shone the flashlight beam on the hearth, the bricks cold and rough under my fingertips. I found the stone from my memory, the one slightly darker than the rest. It looked solid, immovable. For a terrifying second, I thought I had imagined it all, a desperate dream from a heartbroken girl. I tried to wiggle the stone with my fingers, but it was useless. It was cemented in place by time itself. My hope began to crumble. "Here," Chloe whispered, handing me the cold, heavy crowbar. "Be quiet." I slid the flat edge into a tiny crack and pushed. The sound of metal scraping against stone was like a scream in the dead of night. Every tiny noise felt like a betrayal, a signal that would bring my enemies running out the front door. Was I making a huge mistake? What if I was wrong about all of this? Just as I managed to wedge the crowbar firmly behind the stone, a light flicked on in an upstairs window. My father's bedroom. Chloe grabbed my arm and pulled me back, flattening us both against the cold, ivy-covered wall of the bakehouse. We were hidden in the shadows, but my heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it from inside. We watched as the window slid open. A dark figure stood there, looking out into the night. We were completely exposed. If he looked down, he would see us. We were caught. Huddled in the darkness, I remembered another night, years ago. I had snuck out to a party and came home to find him standing in that same window, waiting. He wasn't angry, just sad and disappointed. "I worry about you, Sarah," he'd said. He was never a strong man, always worried about what others thought, especially my uncle. He was a follower, not a leader. I realized then, hiding in the dirt, that my uncle's secret debt hadn't just been a chain around my father's neck. It had been a cage around his heart for years. The figure in the window moved away, and the light went out. He hadn't seen us. The danger had passed. With adrenaline surging through me, I jammed the crowbar deep behind the stone and gave it one powerful push. With a low groan of protest, the stone popped loose. I dropped the tool and reached into the dark, dusty hole. My fingers closed around a small, heavy object wrapped in oilcloth. I had found it. The key. It was real. My grandpa's plan was real. I quickly unwrapped the key, its cold iron a comfort in my shaking hand. But there was something else inside the cloth. A small, folded piece of paper. It was another note from my grandpa, his familiar handwriting, a message from the past. This was no riddle. It was a warning. It said, "Sarah, the bread recipe is our family's soul, but the croissant recipe is its sword. Do not use it unless you are prepared for war." The croissant recipe. We were known for our bread, not our croissants. What could possibly be so special about them? There was no time to think. I jammed the big iron key into the rusted padlock. It fought back, stiff with age. Chloe grabbed my hands and together, we put all our weight into it. With a loud, sudden clank that shattered the night silence, the lock sprang open. We pulled it from the latch and carefully eased the heavy wooden door open. A wave of cool, musty air hit us, carrying the faint, ghostly scent of yeast and wood smoke. We had made it to the heart of the bakery. We slipped inside, pulling the creaking door almost shut behind us. I swept the narrow beam of the flashlight across the room. It was filled with dusty junk, old flour sacks, a broken table, cobwebs thick as cotton. My heart sank. What if everything was gone? Then the light landed on a small, strong-looking wooden chest in the far corner, tucked behind a stack of old canvases. But it wasn't the chest that made me freeze and my blood run cold. It was the marks in the thick dust on the floor. Footprints. They were clear and sharp. And they were fresh. Someone had already been here. The sight of the footprints stole the air from my lungs. Chloe instinctively grabbed my hand and clicked off the flashlight, plunging us into absolute, terrifying darkness. We stood frozen, listening. My mind screamed with questions. Who was here? Was it Leo, coming to claim the real prize? Was it my father, filled with regret? Or were they still in here with us, hiding in the shadows, waiting? The gentle moan of the old building's wooden beams sounded like footsteps closing in on us from all sides. We were caught in a trap. After a long, heart-stopping silence, Chloe risked turning the flashlight back on, keeping the beam aimed at the floor. We knelt down to examine the footprints. They were made by a man's heavy work boot, the kind a gardener or a construction worker would wear. They were definitely not the fancy leather shoes Leo always wore. The prints were caked with fresh, dark soil. They led from the door, made a clear path to the wooden chest in the corner, and then led straight back out the door. Whoever it was, it seemed they were gone. But why were they here? We followed the trail to the old oak chest my grandpa used to store his most precious things. It was bound with black iron straps and looked like something out of a pirate story. My stomach dropped when I saw the lock. It was a big, heavy, old-fashioned thing, but it wasn't locked. It was hanging open from the latch. The mysterious visitor had opened it. A wave of dizziness hit me. Was the book gone? Had I come all this way, risked everything, only to find out I was too late? With a deep breath, I reached out with trembling hands, and Chloe helped me lift the heavy wooden lid. The chest creaked open, releasing the most wonderful smell, a scent of old paper, rich leather, and cedarwood that was the scent of my grandpa himself. My eyes scanned the dark interior, and then I saw it. There, lying on a bed of faded red velvet, was the recipe book. Its worn leather cover, embossed with a single simple stalk of wheat, was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was safe. But that just created a bigger question. Why would someone break in, open the chest, and leave the one thing of value behind? But the book wasn't alone. Tucked beneath it was a small, metal lockbox. On top of the box was a sealed envelope. My name, Serafina, was written across the front in my grandpa's strong, familiar handwriting. My fingers shook as I tore it open. The letter inside was short and simple. My dear Sarah, it read, this book holds our family's soul. But this box holds the seeds. Use them to plant your own garden, far from the rocky soil of this family. I always believed in you. He knew. Somehow, he knew that one day I might need a way out. I remembered being a teenager, complaining to him about saving half of my summer job earnings. He had sat me down in the bakery kitchen. The money you earn yourself is the respect you own, Sarah, he told me, his eyes kind but serious. Never rely on anyone else to build your foundation. A good baker always keeps a secret stash of her best yeast, just in case the main supply goes bad. He wasn't just talking about bread. He was giving me a lesson on how to survive. He was giving me these seeds. We have to open it, Chloe whispered, her eyes wide. She took the small crowbar and, with a quick pop, forced the simple lock on the box. I expected to see a few $100s, a small emergency fund. But it was so much more. Inside was a bank passbook. I opened the little booklet, my eyes scanning the columns of dates and numbers until they landed on the final balance at the bottom. I gasped. It was more than just seeds. It was a forest. Enough to start over. Enough to build an army. But there was something else in the box, tucked under the passbook. It was a bundle of letters, tied neatly with old twine. They were addressed to my grandpa. I recognized the elegant, looping handwriting on the envelopes immediately. It was my grandmother's. But that was impossible. The postmarks on the letters were from years after she had supposedly died in a car accident. My entire life, I'd been told one story. Were these letters proof that my family's whole history was built on a terrible lie? Before my mind could even begin to process the impossible truth of the letters, we heard a noise from directly outside the bakehouse door. A man coughed. A low, gravelly sound. It was not Leo. It was not my father. It was someone else, and they were very, very close. We killed the light and huddled together in the darkness, our breath caught in our throats. The heavy wooden door, which we had left slightly ajar, began to creak open, pushing a thin sliver of moonlight across the dusty floor. The sliver grew wider as a large shadow fell over us. We were completely trapped. The open chest sat between us and the door, its secret contents exposed. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The door swung fully open, and a large man stepped into the doorway, his silhouette blocking our only escape. He was holding a small garden shovel, its edge caked with fresh, dark soil that matched the footprints perfectly. He didn't speak. He just stood there, staring into the darkness where we were hiding, his face hidden in the shadows. He had come back. The man in the doorway was a silent, hulking shadow, and the shovel in his hand looked like it could split a log in two. Chloe and I were frozen, trapped animals in the beam of a hunter's light. My only instinct was to protect my inheritance. I shoved the bank book and the mysterious letters deep into my jacket pocket and clutched the heavy recipe book to my chest as if it were a shield. My mind raced through a dozen horrible possibilities. Was this a thief who had followed us? A man hired by Leo to scare me off? My fight had ended before it had even begun. Then, the man took one slow step forward, moving out of the shadows and into the sliver of moonlight from the open door. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a monster. It was Arthur, the gentle, kind man who had been my grandpa's groundskeeper, and his best friend, for as long as I could remember. His face was older now, etched with more lines than I recalled, but his eyes were the same, calm and full of a quiet strength. Relief so powerful it made my knees weak washed over me, leaving me dizzy. Serafina. Arthur's voice was a low, concerned rumble. He lowered the shovel, his eyes softening as he recognized me. I was in my garden and saw a flashlight beam moving around out here. With what happened at that party, I was worried they had finally decided to tear this old place down. He explained that in my grandpa's last days, he had given Arthur a spare key to the padlock. His one request was for Arthur to watch over this place, to be its guardian, and to make sure his real legacy was safe. He was the one who left the footprints, having come to check on the chest after hearing the commotion earlier in the evening. Suddenly, I was a little girl again, standing in my grandpa's beautiful rose garden. I was trying to help Arthur plant new seedlings, getting frustrated because the tiny seeds kept slipping through my fingers. Arthur had knelt beside me, his big, dirt-covered hands guiding mine. "The most powerful things, little bird," he had said with a warm smile, "often have the smallest beginnings. You just have to protect them, keep them safe, and give them a chance to grow." He wasn't just my grandpa's gardener. He was a part of the family, a part one could trust. Standing in the dusty bakehouse, I told him everything. I told him about Leo's cruel announcement, my father's betrayal, and the riddle that led me here. When I mentioned my grandpa's warning note, the one about the croissant recipe being a sword, Arthur's face grew serious. He nodded slowly. "I remember him talking about that one," he said, his voice grave. "He spent months perfecting it. He called it his ace in the hole. He said it was a recipe so good, it could start a kingdom or end one. He made me promise to warn you about its power if you ever found it." My heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. I had to know more. I pulled the bundle of my grandmother's letters from my pocket. "Arthur, do you know anything about these? I thought Grandma died before I was born, but these were sent years after." A deep sadness crossed Arthur's face. "Your grandpa was a very private man," he said quietly. "He carried a lot of pain. He never told me the details, but he never said she was dead. He only ever said she was gone. Every year on her birthday, he would get in his car and drive east for the whole day. He never said where he went." The mystery was a tangled knot in the center of my family's history, one I had no idea how to unravel. Arthur saw the storm of confusion on my face. "Your grandfather was the finest man I have ever known, Serafina," he said, his voice thick with loyalty. And you are the best part of him. We will not let those fools destroy what he built. Not while I'm still around to do something about it. Whatever you need, a truck, a pair of hands, a lookout, I'm with you. We'll fight this the way he would have, with honesty and quality. A new strength surged through me. I wasn't alone. I had Chloe, my fierce friend, and now Arthur, my grandpa's loyal guardian. We need to get this chest and the lockbox out of here tonight, Chloe said, her voice practical and urgent. Before Leo or your father gets any ideas and comes looking. She was right. But where could we go? We had the book, the money, and the will to fight, but we had no headquarters, no safe place to plan our war. I have a place, Arthur offered immediately. I have a workshop in my garage, 2 towns over in Oak Ridge. It's warm and dry. No one on earth would think to look for you there. It was perfect. A secret base of operations, far from the prying eyes of my family. A place where we could turn my grandfather's seeds of hope into a garden of revenge. The next step was finally clear. We weren't just running anymore. We were advancing to a new position. Under the faint light of a crescent moon, we loaded the heavy oak chest into the back of Arthur's old, dented pickup truck. I took one last look at the house, its windows dark and empty like the eyes of a stranger. But I felt no sadness, no loss. I felt only the cold, hard weight of my purpose. I looked down at the recipe book in my lap and thought of the warning about the sword. Then I looked at the faces of my friends, my small, loyal army. Leo and my aunt wanted a war, I said, my voice quiet but as sharp as a knife. Tomorrow, we start forging the sword. The journey to Oak Ridge was a silent one, the 3 of us lost in our own thoughts as the truck ate up the miles. Arthur's workshop was a large, converted garage at the back of his small, tidy house. It smelled of things he and my grandpa had loved: sawdust, motor oil, and freshly cut grass. In the center of the room, under a single hanging bulb, was a large, sturdy workbench. Arthur cleared it off, and we placed the heavy oak chest upon it like a sacred altar. This wasn't a fancy bakery, but it was a fortress. It was our headquarters. It was the first piece of our new beginning. With my heart pounding, I finally lifted the recipe book from the chest. The leather was soft and worn under my fingers. As I opened it, the pages whispered, releasing the faint, sweet scent of vanilla and old paper. My grandpa's beautiful looping handwriting filled every page. But it was more than just recipes. He had filled the margins with little notes and observations. Mrs. Gable's grandson loves the cinnamon bread. Add extra for him. Beside the recipe for his famous sourdough, he'd written, "A good bread takes time. Just like a good friendship." It wasn't a cookbook. It was his life's love story, written in flour and sugar. I carefully turned the pages, my fingers tracing the familiar names of his creations, until I reached the very back. There, on a special, thicker piece of parchment, was a recipe unlike the others. The heading, written in a darker, more deliberate ink, read, "The Golden Leaf Croissant." The list of ingredients was deceptively simple: flour, butter, yeast, salt, sugar. But the instructions were a maze of scientific detail, spanning 3 full pages with precise timings, temperature charts, and hand-drawn diagrams of complex folding techniques. It was less a recipe and more a blueprint for a masterpiece. At the very bottom of the final page, a personal note was written directly to me. "My dear Sarah," it read, "the secret to this recipe is not in what you add, but what you take away: time. This is a 3-day process. There are no shortcuts. The world moves too fast now, and people have forgotten the taste of something real. Give them something slow. Give them a piece of your heart. That will be a sword they can never defend against." 3 whole days for a pastry? It seemed impossible. What could possibly happen in 3 days to make it so special? I suddenly remembered a Saturday when I was 10. I had tried to make an angel food cake for my grandpa, and it had collapsed into a sticky mess. I tried again and again, each time ending in failure, until I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. My grandpa didn't get angry. He just sat down with me. Baking is a conversation, Sarah, he said softly. You are shouting at the cake, telling it to hurry. You need to listen. The ingredients will tell you when they are ready. He taught me in that moment that patience wasn't just an ingredient. It was the entire recipe. We start right now, I announced, my voice filled with a new resolve. We moved into Arthur's small, spotless kitchen. Chloe took some of the money from the lockbox and went on a mission, returning with the best ingredients money could buy: creamy butter from a local farm, finely milled flour, and fresh yeast. Following my grandpa's blueprint, I began the first stage. I mixed the initial dough, my hands working with a focus I hadn't felt in years. The dough felt different, softer and more alive than any I had worked with before. The next 2 days were an exercise in pure patience. We followed the instructions to the letter. We folded the dough, chilled it, let it rest. Rolled it out, folded it again, and chilled it again. It was a slow, rhythmic dance of time and temperature. In the long hours of waiting, I would pull out my grandmother's letters. I'd stare at the dates and the unfamiliar addresses, my mind a storm of questions. But I always folded them and put them away. One war at a time. The past would have to wait. My future was slowly rising in a bowl in Arthur's refrigerator. On the morning of the 3rd day, the moment of truth arrived. I carefully cut and shaped the chilled, layered dough. My hands moved with an instinct I inherited from my grandpa, each croissant a perfect, delicate crescent. I placed them on a baking sheet and slid them into Arthur's oven, which he had already heated to the perfect temperature. We all held our breath. Was this real? Was the magic my grandpa promised trapped within those layers of dough? Or was this all just a foolish dream? Minutes later, a scent began to fill the kitchen. It started as a whisper of melting butter, and then grew into a symphony of warm, caramelized, heavenly aroma that was so beautiful it brought tears to my eyes. Arthur slowly opened the oven door, and we all gasped in unison. The croissants were a wonder. They were puffed up to an impossible size, a deep golden brown, with 100 paper-thin layers visible on the outside. They didn't just look perfect. They looked alive. I took a bite. A shower of crispy flakes gave way to an airy, buttery, melt-in-your-mouth center. It was magic. Chloe bit into one, and her eyes went wide with shock. "Sarah," she said, her voice full of awe, "this isn't a croissant. This is a declaration of war." A brilliant, perfect idea clicked into place in my mind. A full-blown bakery would take months. We didn't have months. We had to strike now. I grabbed a map of my old town from Arthur's glove box and spread it on the table. My finger landed on a spot in the very center. "The Oak Creek Farmers Market is every Saturday," I said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. "Leo's Bakery has a booth there every week. We're going to get a permit and set up a stall right across from his." The days leading up to the farmers market were a blur of organized chaos. Arthur, with his lifetime of connections in town, worked a small miracle and secured us a last-minute vendor permit. Chloe, with her natural artistic talent, designed our entire brand in one evening. She decided we needed a look of simple elegance to contrast with the loud branding of the main bakery. She bought plain white pastry boxes and spools of beautiful gold ribbon. We would be called the Golden Leaf, a quiet, secret nod to the recipe that was our only weapon. It felt perfect. The night before the market, Arthur's kitchen felt like a military command center. We were on a mission, baking hundreds of croissants in precise, timed waves. The whole house was warm and filled with the intoxicating smell of butter, sugar, and victory. But as I carefully folded a sheet of dough, a cold wave of fear washed over me. What if this was a mistake? What if the whole town saw me as a traitor for competing with my own family's business? What if Leo stood in the middle of the market and told everyone lies about me? My hands froze, the dough suddenly feeling heavy and dead. Chloe saw the terror in my eyes. She came over and gently placed her hands over mine. "Sarah, stop thinking and just feel," she said softly. "Your grandpa poured his soul into this recipe. Arthur is risking his quiet retirement for it. I'm risking getting fired from my catering job for it. We believe in this. More importantly, we believe in you." She pointed to a perfect, golden croissant cooling on a rack. "You're not just selling pastry. You're selling a memory. You're selling magic. They will taste the difference." Her words were the strength I needed. The fear melted away, replaced by a steely resolve. We arrived at the market as the sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon. The air was crisp and cool, filled with the sounds of vendors setting up and the smell of fresh coffee. Our spot was exactly where we wanted it, directly across a narrow aisle from the huge, flashy Hayes and Son Bakery booth. They had a massive red and white banner, a gleaming glass display case filled with dozens of different pastries, and two bored-looking employees in uniforms. We had a simple folding table, a small hand-painted sign that read "The Golden Leaf," and our white boxes, stacked in neat pyramids. It didn't take long for Leo to notice us. He swaggered over, holding a large coffee, a condescending smirk plastered on his face. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," he said, his voice loud enough for the neighboring vendors to hear. "Little cousin Sarah, playing grown-up with her own little bake sale. That's adorable." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't worry, I won't tell Mom you're trying to compete with the big boys. It's too funny." He walked off without even looking at our croissants, completely dismissing us. His arrogance was the best gift he could have given me. My face burned with humiliation, but I held my head high. For the first hour, business was slow. People glanced at our simple table but kept walking toward the more established vendors. Then, a miracle happened in the form of Mrs. Gable, a sweet old woman who had been one of my grandpa's favorite customers. "Serafina, dear. Is that you?" she exclaimed, her face lighting up. "I was so sad when I heard you'd left the bakery." I smiled, my heart aching with gratitude. "I'm just starting something new, Mrs. Gable." I handed her a croissant. "Please, try one." She took a bite, and her eyes, cloudy with age, went wide with wonder. "Oh, my dear," she whispered. This is your grandfather's magic." Mrs. Gable bought 24 and immediately walked over to a group of her friends, insisting they try one. One of them bought a box. Then two more people who overheard them came over. A young man who ran a popular local food blog bought one, took a bite, and immediately started typing furiously on his phone. Within an hour, a small, curious line had formed in front of our table. The whispers were spreading through the market like wildfire. "Have you tried the croissant at the little white booth?" Across the aisle, Leo was leaning against his counter, laughing with his staff. At first, he didn't notice. But as our line grew, snaking past the organic vegetable stand next to us, his laughter died. His smirk faded into a look of confusion. He watched as person after person bit into our croissants with looks of pure bliss on their faces. He saw people holding our simple white and gold boxes like they were precious jewels. He couldn't understand what was happening. Frowning, Leo sent one of his employees over to buy a croissant. The employee brought it back, and Leo tore off a piece, popping it into his mouth with an arrogant flick of his wrist. I watched his face. The arrogance instantly vanished, replaced by a flash of disbelief, then confusion, and then something I had been waiting to see, pure, undiluted panic. The color drained from his face as the truth hit him. He knew. He knew in that single bite that he was selling a cheap imitation, and I was selling the real thing. Our line was now the biggest and loudest in the entire market. We were selling croissants so fast we could barely keep up. Just then, a woman with a reporter's notepad and a friendly but professional smile reached the front of the line. "Hi, I'm the food critic for the County Chronicle," she said, looking from me to my simple sign. "The entire market is buzzing about you. They're saying you're selling the best croissants on this side of the Atlantic. I'd love to ask you a few questions." Leo stood frozen across the aisle, his face a perfect mask of helpless rage. The war had begun. And the first shot was a sound he would never forget, the thunderous applause of a happy crowd. My heart hammered against my ribs as the food critic, a kind-faced woman named Margaret, smiled at me. "Tell me about the golden leaf," she said, her pen poised over her notepad. I took a deep breath and told her a story. Not the ugly story of betrayal and greed, but a beautiful one about my grandfather. I spoke of his love for baking, his belief in taking things slow, and the secret recipes he considered his family's true soul. I explained that I wanted to honor his real legacy by starting something small and pure, something that was about passion, not just profit. Every word was the truth, and every word was a perfectly aimed stone at Leo's glass house. Leo couldn't stand it. He saw the crowd listening intently, he saw the reporter writing down my every word, and his arrogance boiled over into rage. He stormed across the aisle, his face twisted with fury. "This is a complete lie," he shouted, pointing a finger at me. The whole market went quiet. "She's a disgruntled ex-employee. She's using recipes and techniques she learned at my bakery, Hayes and Son. This whole pathetic little stand is built on family property she stole." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and false. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice as calm and steady as my grandpa's hands kneading dough. "My grandfather taught me that our real family name is quality, Leo. A name you have to earn every single day. And these croissants," I said, gesturing to my sold-out table, "are from his personal recipe book. A gift he left only to me." Margaret, the food critic, was scribbling furiously, her eyes darting between me and Leo. The drama was better than anything she could have hoped for. This wasn't just a food story anymore. It was a story of family, betrayal, and a battle for a legacy. I remembered a day when a customer returned a slightly burnt loaf of bread. My father had wanted to just apologize, but my grandpa insisted on giving the man 2 perfect loaves for free. Later he told me, "The name on our sign is just paint on wood, Sarah. Our real name is baked into every loaf that leaves this shop. You burn a loaf, you burn our name. Never forget that." Looking at Leo's furious face, I knew he had forgotten. He thought the name was something he could own, not something he had to earn. The crowd began to murmur, looking from Leo's expensive, angry face to my simple, honest setup. They remembered the taste of my croissant, a taste of quality and care. They looked at the bland, generic pastries sitting untouched in Leo's shiny display case. An old farmer who had just bought my last box of croissants shouted from the crowd, "Hey buddy, I don't care about your family drama. The girl's baking is better. Leave her alone." A wave of applause and shouts of agreement erupted through the market. Leo stood there, utterly humiliated, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. Defeated and exposed, he turned and stomped back to his booth like a spoiled child. Margaret, the critic, gave me a small, encouraging wink. "Thank you, Serafina," she said. "I think I have a great story. It will be on the front page of the lifestyle section on Monday." The rest of the afternoon was a dream. We sold every last croissant. People didn't just come to buy, they came to offer their support, telling me to stay strong and that the whole town was behind me. We had won. We had won the court of public opinion. Back in the safety of Arthur's workshop, we emptied the cash box onto the workbench. The pile of money was bigger than I could have imagined. It was real. It was proof. We had a viable business. We had a future. We celebrated, laughing with relief and joy. But as the sun set, a cold feeling of dread began to creep into my heart. Leo and his family were not the kind of people to accept defeat gracefully. This victory was just the beginning of the war. My phone buzzed, displaying an unknown number. I answered, my voice cautious. "Sarah." It was my father. He sounded terrified. "What have you done?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "You made your uncle furious. He is not a forgiving man. He's not just angry, Sarah. He's calling his lawyer." My blood ran cold. A lawyer. For what? I hadn't done anything illegal. The recipes were mine, the money was mine, the business was mine. "He says you broke a contract," my father stammered, his voice choked with fear. A contract your grandfather signed. It says that if any member of the Hayes family opens a competing bakery business within the county, they have to forfeit their entire inheritance and pay a penalty to my brother. A huge one. The words didn't make sense. It was impossible. My grandpa would never, ever sign something so cruel. He would never trap me like that. That can't be true, I whispered, sinking onto a stool. The workshop suddenly felt cold. He would have told me. My father let out a broken sob on the other end of the line. He signed it the week he passed away, Sarah. He was on so much medication, he wasn't thinking clearly. Your uncle brought it to him and told him it was just a simple business document. He tricked him. There was a long pause, and then my father delivered the final, devastating blow. The penalty. It's the full value of the bakery, plus damages. They're going to use it to take every penny your grandpa left you. You didn't just win a battle today, Sarah. You walked right into their trap. The phone call with my father left me in a state of shock, the world around me turning into a blurry, silent film. The happy sounds of our victory celebration in Arthur's workshop faded into a distant hum. The pile of money on the workbench looked like a pile of useless paper. My uncle had built the perfect trap, and my own grandfather, the man I loved most in the world, had handed him the key. Chloe and Arthur tried to comfort me, but their words were just noise. I had walked straight into a cage, and my own ambition had slammed the door shut behind me. Feeling numb, I reached into my pocket and my fingers brushed against the bundle of my grandmother's letters. I pulled them out, the old twine a fragile link to a past I never knew. I needed an answer, any answer. I needed to know why my family was built on so many secrets. I untied the twine, and the first envelope fell open in my lap. The letter was dated 15 years ago, a full decade after she had supposedly died. My hands shaking, I began to read. But this wasn't a love letter filled with memories. It was a business letter. My dearest Robert, she had written to my grandpa, the farm did well this harvest. I've enclosed the cashier's check for this month's profit share, as always. I hope your brother is managing the investment account well for you. I still feel guilty for leaving you to handle him after the divorce, but I could not live with a man who gambled away our children's future. Divorce. Gambled. Investment account. My entire body went cold. It wasn't my father who had a huge debt. It was my uncle. My grandmother had divorced him, not died. And she had been sending my grandpa money for years. Arthur, seeing the look on my face, took one of the letters and read it. His jaw dropped. Your uncle, he said, his voice barely a whisper. He always told your grandpa he was a brilliant investor. He handled all of your grandpa's mail from that special P.O. box. Your grandpa trusted him with everything. The horrible, ugly truth fell into place like pieces of a poisoned puzzle. My uncle hadn't saved my father from a debt. He had been stealing from my grandpa for decades, taking the money his own mother sent, and then invented the debt story to control my weak, guilt-ridden father. Suddenly, I understood everything. My grandfather wasn't a victim. He was a genius. He must have discovered the truth near the end of his life, when he was too sick to fight. So he did what he did best. He set a trap. He created the perfect recipe for justice. The contract wasn't a mistake made by a sick old man. It was a brilliant, final move in a game only he was playing. It was a baited hook, and he knew his brother's greed was so powerful that he would swallow it whole, without even thinking. Tucked into the last envelope was one final note, in my grandpa's handwriting. It was for me. Sarah, it read. A good baker knows their enemy's appetite. Your uncle is greedy for what is ours. I have signed a contract that will look like his victory. But the final ingredient is the truth, and I have left that for you to find. He thinks he is claiming a prize, but he is actually signing a confession to his debt. Go bake him his last meal. The letters were the proof. The contract was the cage, and I was the one holding the key. The next morning, we did not call a lawyer. We walked straight into Hayes and Son Bakery. Leo and my uncle were in the main office, celebrating. My father stood off to the side, looking like a ghost. "Well, well," my uncle said, a triumphant sneer on his face. He slid the contract across the desk. "It's over. Sign the check, and leave this town forever." I smiled, a slow, cold smile. "You're right," I said, my voice clear and strong. "It is over." I didn't reach for a pen. I reached into my bag and placed the stack of my grandmother's letters on the desk, right on top of his contract. "She sends her love, by the way," I said, looking my uncle dead in the eyes. "From her farm. The one that has been sending you money every month for the last 20 years. I read a line from one of the letters, detailing the exact amount of a transfer. I watched the color drain from my uncle's face. My father gasped, finally understanding the depth of the lies that had ruined his life. Leo looked from his father to me, his brain unable to process what was happening. The trap had sprung. I pushed the contract back toward him. "Grandpa was a very clever man," I said. "This document doesn't say I owe you a penalty. It says that any family member in a competing business is entitled to settle all outstanding family debts. You thought that meant my father's fake debt to you. But Grandpa meant your real debt to him. A debt that, with interest, is worth far more than this bakery. You didn't write a contract. You signed a confession. And now it's time to pay." The end was swift and silent. My uncle, utterly defeated and exposed as a thief, signed the bakery and all its assets back over to me to avoid a criminal investigation. He and Leo walked out with nothing but the shame on their faces. My father broke down, apologizing through a flood of tears, finally free from his brother's poison. Our family was broken, but for the first time, we had a chance to heal. A few weeks later, I took a long drive east, the recipe book on the passenger seat. I found a small, beautiful farm with a woman who had my grandpa's kind eyes. I handed her a golden leaf croissant, and for the first time in my life, I met my grandmother. The name on the sign now reads, Hayes and Granddaughter, and every morning, we bake a little bit of magic. This story was about how the simple truth can be the most powerful ingredient of all. It's a reminder that even when things seem hopeless, there is always a way to fight back if you have love and courage on your side. If this story touched your heart and made you cheer for Serafina's victory, please do us a favor and hit that like button, share it with your friends and family, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next powerful story. Thank you for being a part of this journey.